over a century ago has eroded the purchasing power of the US dollar by 99%. So what was really going on there? Do you think that these investors built up the equity of the United States, made us more profitable? It's exactly the opposite. We have been living in a prolonged economic depression. They just don't call it that because the metrics that we use to measure the economy are coming from a rigged system, just like we saw with LIBOR. Don't bother to look at the Dow Jones. Don't bother to look at the NASDAQ. That has nothing to do with the reality of everyone else and how hard it has become to earn a living. The complete wiping out of the middle class. You have rich and you have poor. And even among the rich, you then have super rich people where a concentrated small cluster of individuals have so much wealth that it could feed entire nations, entire peoples. So this is something that is an economic inequality that must be addressed. And the only way that we're ever really going to learn this is by a collective, massive understanding.
I say the elite powers in control, which is really the same as these central banking dynasties that are basically sitting over the nations. They are a form of global government, except that they are not government at all. They're just dominants. They are dominants. They are the ones that issue the orders to all the nations. As we saw clearly in 1947, after Roswell, we saw these elite powers in control issue these orders to all the nations that anything real that comes up in regards to alien visitors or UFOs must immediately be covered up at all costs, no matter what. And that was that was how that wall, the embargo of truth, that Berlin Wall went up originally in 1947. And that's an example of them in action over the nations. And that's the reason why disclosure and the images that conjures up in our minds is not a real thing, really, because the nations, whether you're talking about the United States or any place else, they don't have the actual agenda of aliens to reveal. They're not on the inside of that. They really aren't. Nations just follow orders. That's all they do. And that's what they're doing now, and that's what they always do. And when you see them all doing something strange or something that seems out of the ordinary, it's because they're following the orders of the elite powers in control.
We stand at the birth of a new millennium, ready to unlock the mysteries of space, to free the Earth from the miseries of disease, and to harness the energies, industries, and technologies of tomorrow. A new national pride will stir our souls, lift our sights, and heal our divisions. It's time to remember that old wisdom our soldiers will never forget, that whether we are black or brown or white, we all bleed the same red blood of patriots.
After the inauguration, the president signed a number of secret memorandums stating that he wanted the release of advanced technology, and a lot of this technology was involved in the space program, and he was very aware of it. We know that President Trump is aware of advanced technologies because his uncle was the one who went in and cleared out the safe of Tesla after his death. So we are fairly sure that President Trump grew up bouncing on his uncle's knee, hearing stories of free energy. Aside from the secret space program alliance, we have a different alliance. It is made up of all of these countries that have been fighting against this cabal for 50 years or so. It is also made up of various military groups that have broken away from the cabal, such as elements of the United States military intelligence groups have broken away and have been participating with a lot of other breakaway groups in trying to overthrow the cabal who took over the United States back in the 1960s, around 1963. This alliance, Earth Alliance, began to get more and more organized. And they got organized to a point to where some of them approached some generals and told them that they wanted to do an open coup in the United States. These generals decided they would make one last-ditch attempt to get rid of the cabal legally. And that's when they approached Trump, allegedly, to run for president and allow them to legally get the country back, basically.
The Alliance is an international group. It is a confederacy. There are lots of different factions, some of which agree, some of which do not agree, about the only thing that they all have in common is they want to see this satanic, pedophile, elitist cabal come down in flames. They do not want these people trying to kill off most of the planet, trying to control all of this immensely high technology. The Alliance also consists of a surprising majority now of personnel in the US military and in the US intelligence community. So we're going to have to deal with the fact sooner or later, and probably sooner, that not everybody in the government is bad. This is part of the psyop that was put out through movies and through media to get us to completely distrust all levels of society, all of the institutions, so that no one will ever be able to oppose these people. You're not going to do this by a bunch of keyboard warriors on the internet. They're not going to actually take the solid action that needs to be taken. What you do need to see is what we now are counting up in August 2018 as 45,000 sealed indictments. Now, this is on the official U.S. government court record. You can go to the pacer.gov website, which lists all of the lawsuits and all of the indictments filed in all of the different districts in America, and just count up the sealed indictments. The official count, the undisputed count, is 45,000, and the normal number for any given year is approximately 1,000. Now, this is a very, very big story that people are really not seeing exactly how awesome this is. Let's talk about what do you have to do to get a sealed indictment. Okay, a sealed indictment is the result of a secret grand jury proceeding. Now, what is a secret grand jury? A secret grand jury requires a panel of 12 to 23 U.S. citizens who are then given information and testimony from a prosecutor. The prosecutor is prosecuting a particular individual who is not invited to the proceedings, has no idea this is going on. And in legal terms, that's called ex parte. So he or she is testified against by the prosecutor, and then the jury has to decide if there is sufficient cause to prosecute this person with a crime. In which case, they file a sealed indictment. The indictment stays off the record. You don't get to know the person's name until they unseal it, at which point the person is immediately arrested. And then they get to have the regular trial by jury with a judge. But you have to understand that the prosecutor is either a federal U.S. attorney, a county district attorney, or a state attorney general. These are big, big league players. This is not some attorney that you hire in Podunk, okay? These are major players creating major indictments. And the reason why they do it this way is that they're prosecuting organized crime. Typically, that's what it is. They're prosecuting a larger ring where they can't indict one person at a time. They have to get all their ducks in a row. They have to line it all up so that when they unseal the indictments, everybody gets arrested at once, and there's no ability for them to tip each other off that something happened so that the rats can flee off of the sinking ship. They all get nailed at once.
The phenomenon known as Q, or QAnon, came onto the scene at the very end of October 2017. And what essentially occurred is that a group that called themselves Q began posting on anonymous online image boards called 4chan and 8chan. And what they were posting was a lot of questions, a lot of suggestions, a lot of very interesting and intriguing data sets that essentially laid out a real-time takedown of the deep state by alliance and white hat groups behind the scenes.
As the QAnon briefings recently stated, these indictments are going to be like Watergate times 1,000. We've never seen anything like this in the history of the world. Some of the most recent QAnon briefings, which our insiders have told us is coming from the alliance, have said that there are many, many figures in the controlled mainstream media who are in these indictments as well. So Harvey Weinstein is just the beginning. And isn't it interesting that when Harvey Weinstein was finally arrested, in his hand he had the biography of Elia Kazan, who was a guy in early Hollywood history who was brought in during the McCarthy investigations and sang like a songbird and ratted out many other people in Hollywood. And Weinstein has now said he is doing the same thing and that everybody in Hollywood was doing the same stuff that he was doing. So he was upset about why he got singled out. So once these indictments become unsealed, this will be the fulfillment of the mass arrest scenario that I have been leaking on my website since 2009.
The only two indictments that we've had unsealed so far involved the cult group NXIVM, the founder of NXIVM, Keith Raniere, and one of his understudies, the actress Allison Mack. These are the only two unsealed court records so far. And their unsealed indictments actually labeled child sex trafficking on them. And NXIVM has found to be a hotbed of cult activity, of ritual abuse, and of child sex abuse even. So if these are the only two records that have been unsealed so far, and they are taking down names of this caliber with charges of this caliber, we can only imagine what the rest of these unsealed indictments are going to show us.
This is nothing new. It didn't start with the QAnon briefings, has nothing to do with who's president of the United States right now. This is a decades-long effort in the making, and they have tried and tried and tried in various ways to get this to work. They've had consistent failures, and now they're being much more systematic and much more methodical. It's all going to be done legally. All of the indictments are totally bona fide. And it's just that once this finally happens, it will be something we have never seen before in all of American history, a true second American Revolution.
One of the things I learned as an FBI agent is it's not that I learned to believe in conspiracies more. What I learned to know is when I am caught up in a river of deception and everybody else around me is being taken on the same current, and we're all being taken in one direction, and suddenly one guy has to stick his head up and say, this isn't right. This is all wrong. We're all just being fed garbage, and we're not being told the truth. Well, how is it that technology in today's age, our technology has moved forward by leaps and bounds in so many areas, yet we're still driving, the entire world is still driving automobile that function essentially on the same technology that they have for 100 years. 100 years, and we're still using fossil fuels to fill up our gas tanks. How is that possible? That has not moved forward hardly one iota. I mean, they blend the stuff sometimes, but I mean, essentially, technology has been stuck for 100 years. Well, that's because that's one of the economic factors from the globalists that is so dead set against distributing real energy, which is free energy, which we know was discovered during Tesla's time.
So Nikola Tesla is known, of course, for delving into free energy or zero-point energy sciences, but funny enough, near the end of Nikola Tesla's life, he was actually delving into anti-gravity research. And unfortunately, Tesla didn't have enough time nor money towards the end of his life to be able to continue his research into anti-gravity, but he passed along his knowledge to a man named Otis Carr. And funny story about that, Nikola Tesla was staying in a hotel in New York near the end of his career. And during his stay at this hotel, he befriended one of the workers that was there, and that was Otis Carr. And they courted a relationship, and Nikola Tesla actually felt comfortable enough to begin sharing some of his research with Otis Carr. Now, Otis Carr then went, after Nikola Tesla's passing, to develop this research out a little bit more so, and Otis Carr actually developed what was called the OCT-X1, I believe, and it was actually a flying saucer craft that was piloted with the consciousness of the individual, and he did, supposedly, actual experiments that were successful in navigating both space and time with this craft. So we could say Otis Carr actually was the first person to develop begin to develop a civilian-based space program, but he was essentially run out of business and was not able to continue the work he was doing because the military-industrial complex suppressed his work.
But the same forces that destroyed that, at that time, supposedly it was Thomas Edison, who was a part of the global system. He was the original fossil fuels and normal electricity system, and he was just a front man to destroy Tesla and destroy his because the efforts to destroy his patents came from national government, not just Edison and his private conglomerate that had billions of dollars even at that time. And the reason for that is why? Because this effort to repress free energy was coming from the elite powers in control, the ones that sit on top of everybody and tell everybody, we gotta stop this. And what we're seeing today, of course, is that free energy is like a dam that they're sprouting leaks, and it's getting ready to burst forward because it is coming, and it's coming really soon because it's been out there for so long. And I think we're getting to the point where it is gonna come forward, and it's gonna come forward maybe from several sources at the same time because the pressure has built up so much from so many different sources. So I think we are gonna get it very soon.
I was asked to give a paper at Vandenberg Air Force Base to the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And their normal request would have been, tell us how you're trying to get new business using advanced technology. In other words, that was my job, to run 250 guys with different disciplines to try to get new business. But instead, I surprised them by saying, I want to give a talk called The Giant Discoveries of Future Science. And there was a moment of silence, and okay. So I developed this talk, and in this talk, what I established was I distinguished the difference between engineering and science. Engineers being people who want to build something and make it work. They don't really care how to get there. And the scientists who want to know the, quote, truth underneath. And I made that distinction, and then I gave examples of 10 scientific facts that are essentially established. That the Earth evolved by gradual processes, and that there are Maxwell's equations are the right answer, and then Einstein's E equals MC squared, that was all good. And then I took these 10 greatest achievements by the 10 scientists and asked, what can we tell about these 10? And the interesting thing was that you could tell 3 things. Number one, not a single one of them was known in the field. Number 2, every single one of them had been criticized by their peers as being stupid or charlatans. And number 3, the average age was 23 when they made their discovery. So I took that thought and wrote down a list of what I thought were the 12 greatest discoveries of the future that we had to attack. And the first one was how the UFOs work. The second was time travel. Well, not time travel was towards the end, but the processes of the brain and the mind, psychic discoveries, psychokinesis, that sort of thing, and a bunch of those things were on the list. And the amazing thing is that today, in 2017, I am satisfied that my list that I said would maybe, and I gave a probability of discovering these things, 20 years from now, my list was essentially already discovered, every single one, including time travel, at the time that I gave this paper.
My engine's complete. I rebuilt it. I have the entire package sitting and outsourced on the servers around the planet. Upon my death, the servers dump everything onto the web. And I mean everything. Blueprints, schematics, diagrams, list of materials, list of tools, list of suppliers that will help you get the tools, dimensions, 3-dimensional working models. You'll be able to any normal lab would be able to reconstruct this thing, get the same results I did. And I want that done because that will be validation of technology. But once it's built, it's not going to sit there. They're going to use it. And I suspect in a year's time, once that kind of technology is dumped, they build it, they start using it, oil is reduced to a lubricant planet-wide, and that's it. That's the first step. Imagine what happens next. I don't want to be around. That's the reason it'd be a media circus, and I just not into that. So I'll just leave it behind, and y'all can play with it and do with what you want.
So how do we hear all of this information and not feel disempowered? How does it not feel hopeless? Well, I look back when I start to feel hopeless to the reports of legitimate ET contacts that have occurred in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. In all of those reports, the ETs asked 2 things: grow spiritually or expand your consciousness, and demand the release of suppressed technologies from your governments. Those are the 2 things that we can focus on. If we begin to organize and demand the release of suppressed technologies, they will have no choice. If we focus inwardly on whatever our religion is, becoming the best human being that we can, and expanding our consciousness beyond our comfortable belief systems, when we do those 2 things, we are going to gain the freedom that we desire.
I started realizing that the cabal or the Illuminati or whatever you want to call them, they keep us fighting with each other intentionally because they know that the potential in our unified consciousness, should we ever come together and stop fighting with each other, is extremely powerful. And they have been using that energy against us, like farming and managing our consciousness in such a way that we spin out a version of reality from the thoughts they program into us that makes the Matrix, just like in the Matrix films. And so we have made the Matrix that's our prison. We made it from our consciousness and our thought that's been managed, farmed, programmed, and controlled. And if that's true, then we have the power within ourselves to come together and stop fighting with each other and remake the world. And emotion is key. We're not taught anything about how to deal with our emotions in this world. It's like a big black hole, and we just spurt emotional energy all over the place like an out-of-control garden hose. You know, would we waste money like that in most cases? Would we waste gasoline in our car that way? No. Well, we need to look at our emotional energy the same way, because that's the big key. And we have powerful emotions as human beings, and that means a lot of emotional power. But the only way we can wield it is to come together and find our commonalities and build on those, and stop looking at our ideologies that might divide us and our beliefs that might divide us. We've got to come together. We've got to focus on the fact we're all human beings. We all have hearts and souls and conscience. And we need to look at what brings us together. And then we need to take the emotional energy of that love and connection and make that really, really powerful, and then release it intentionally in waves of consciousness, energy, and power that can remake this world and the matrix it's based on in ways that we want for ourselves, for our children, for our grandchildren, for all the animals in the environment. We can remake it just through the power of consciousness. We can get full disclosure just through the power of consciousness. But we can only wield this energy together, and we can only wield it with love for each other and the planet.
We're at the early stages of this movement, and every movement, whether we're talking about the civil rights movement, the abolition movement, the women's rights movement, it's always once it reaches a kind of like a critical mass, then the political changes happen.
So this is a very, very compelling story. I do believe that it's time for all of us to take a stand. We cannot simply step back and allow all these things to happen. Even if we don't fully believe everything that the people in this movie and other insiders like them have been saying, it's worthy of our consideration. Can we really afford to be so ignorant as to turn our backs on this information? We don't have the time to sit around and argue about whether this information is true. The planet is dying. We have economic collapse. We have mass starvation. We have the largest mass extinction since the collapse of the dinosaurs. Our ecosphere is collapsing. We see the lack of water. We see ever-increasing global temperatures, and no one really is doing anything about it. The entrenched power structure stays the way it is. We're still burning fossil fuels. We're still not getting access to these amazing technologies. If we do get full disclosure, now the dam breaks. Now we're in a totally new reality, which very well could be the golden age that was promised to us in so many different ancient teachings and traditions. I do believe that in our lifetimes, we will see the full disclosure of the so-called forbidden technology. We will become a truly galactic civilization. And we will do this with the cooperation of people in the military, people in the intelligence community, people who were working for the cabal and have decided to break away from all that, become insiders, and be the change that we want to see in the world. This film is an embodiment of that global movement. This film is the red pill that wakes you up to what's really going on in the world. They do not have the staff to fight us. The cabal is losing. We are on the winning side of history. We are moving forward step by step, and at some point, this is all going to break open. So when we raise consciousness, when we come together as a group, when we create this initiative, when we define what we want, by having that be our state of mind, we are literally transforming this planet into the golden oasis that it was always supposed to be, and the breathtaking future that we have been hearing about from so many ancient traditions. Whether you want to call it ascension, the golden age, whatever it is, I do believe it's possible, and it is up to us to co-create this amazing reality.
Power in defense of freedom is greater than power in behalf of tyranny and oppression, because power, real power, comes from our convictions, which produce uncompromising action. Every daring attempt to make a great change in existing conditions, every lofty vision of new possibilities for the human race, has been labeled utopian. Like it or not, everything is changing. The result will be the most wonderful experience in the history of humanity, or the most horrible enslavement that you can imagine. We must draw our strength from the very despair in which we have been forced to live. We were born with potential. We were born with goodness and trust. We were born with ideals and dreams. We were born with greatness. We are the universe in ecstatic motion, and it does not require many words to speak the truth. The ultimate end of all revolutionary social change is to establish the sanctity of human life, the right of every human on the planet to liberty and well-being. Do not allow yourself to get lost in the fear of change. Remember, the wound is the place where the light enters you. We are here to laugh at the odds and live our lives so well that death will tremble to take us.
very importantly, I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a Space Force as the 6th branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement.
If you are willing to come forward with information regarding suppressed technologies, you can do so anonymously through secretspaceprogram.com. We have end-to-end encrypted communication options available and a Tor site that supports dead drops of any file types.